I'm Sam.
And this is Gabe.
And this is Coaster Wars.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, today we are breaking our top 10 roller coasters that we have ridden. Just real quick, what is your coaster count? I'm curious.
I think I have to go through my Hershey Park and actually add up the rides, but I either have 101 or 102 credits.
Oh, okay. And I got 100 and... am I at 108 now?
Yeah, whatever. 6 ahead of me.
Hold on, let me load my page here and I'll be able to tell you what I'm at. 109 coasters. That's what I'm at.
Ooh.
So we're both over 100 credits. That's definitely one thing I think we should quick cover is that we've only ridden 100 coasters in the country here. So if you don't see a roller coaster within our top 10 that you think deserves to be there, it's probably because we haven't ridden it yet.
Oh yeah, there are so many parks out there that me and you collectively haven't been to. Like you said, you haven't been to Hershey Park yet, and you haven't been to Six Flags New England. I haven't been to Carowinds, either of the Busch Gardens, and you've been to those parks. Or didn't you go to one in Texas too?
I went to Six Flags Fiesta, Texas. I didn't get to make it to Over, Texas, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got to go to Six Flags Fiesta, Texas.
Yeah. The moral of the story here, there is a lot of parks in this country that me and Gabe still need to get our butts to ride some really great coasters out there that, so as he said, just because they're not in our top 10 doesn't mean that we haven't considered them. It just, like you said, is just a circumstance where we have maybe just not ridden the coaster yet, so.
Yeah, for sure. And then the other thing you were telling me is that you created an email for our podcast, correct?
Yes, I did. It is coasterwars@gmail.com.
So, as we're gearing down to get towards the end of this list, after we finish our top 15s, we're going to be looking for more roller coasters to talk about. So if you guys want to send an email in, and I'll have her put it in the description of the episode as well. That way, if you guys want to send an email in of a coaster battle that you would like to see, or just a coaster that you would like to see featured in our podcast here, what we'll do is whatever people send us in, me and her will pick a coaster from that, and we'll do a couple of episodes like that. I think that would be fun.
Yeah, just to make it easier on me, if anyone who wants to send in a suggestion, just in the subject line, put coaster suggestion, and then I know to look for those specifically for any suggestions for future episodes.
All right, but with that, we are heading into our next episode. Is this our 6th episode now?
Yes.
I can't even keep track.
Yes.
So this is our 6th episode. We're in our top 10. These are our number 10 roller coasters. We have a repeat, which is you're bringing to the table.
Yes.
And then my coaster is something that we haven't even mentioned this coaster type yet in this podcast. So it'll definitely be an interesting one, I think.
Oh, yeah. And it'll be interesting with these repeats. I think it's really cool kind of to see what me and you both think of the coasters and how they fall a little bit differently on both of our lists. And then, yeah, to talk about a coaster that we haven't really talked about on the podcast and really our thoughts on this type of coaster. I believe we both have a version of it in our lists, but different ones. So that'll also be interesting.
Oh, for sure. But without further ado, should we introduce these two roller coasters?
Go ahead.
All right. In the blue corner, standing at a height of 310 feet and reaching a top speed of 93 miles per hour, hailing from the shores of Lake Erie and the Intamin Gym, it is Millenium Force. In the red corner, standing at a height of 150 feet, reaching a top speed of 60 miles per hour, hailing from the shores of Tampa Bay, Florida, and the B&M Gym, it is Montu. Let the fight begin. So my number 10 coaster would be Montu.
And my number 10 coaster is Millennium Force.
So talking about it right away, Millennium Force was in our last episode, correct?
Yes.
Was it our last one or the episode before? So we've talked about Millennium Force. I think we should just go right into that coaster and just do kind of a basic overview. You want to do the layout right away?
Yes. So this coaster starts with a lift hill directly out of the station. That's one of the advantages to that cable lift hill that Intamin is so well known for. And it brings you up that 310 foot tall lift hill to drop you down an exact 300 feet at 80 degrees. And you pull out into that first 169 foot tall, 122 degree overbanked curve. You then come down into another speed curve, which leads you into the 152 foot long tunnel, which then leads into the tallest hill on the ride. It's 182 feet. And just to think about that for a second, this ride brings you up another hill, 182 feet. That's taller than some other coasters' lift hills. But to continue, you then go into a 105 foot tall overbanked curve, which then leads you into another speed curve, which leads into another 121 foot tall, 13 degree overbanked turn. Goodness, can't talk. Which leads into another hill, another tunnel, and then the most ejector airtime on the ride is that little bunny hill, and the final 116 degree overbanked curve. It's 68 feet tall, and that brings you into the final brake run of the ride.
Yeah, it's definitely an impressive layout. The one thing that we were mentioning last episode is that this coaster really carries its speed. Other than the two airtime hills, it moves. It cruises through this layout. So even though it's 6,000 feet of track, 6,500 feet of track, it goes through it fairly quickly. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, it's got a top speed of 93 miles per hour. And you do not see a decrease in that speed, I feel like, at all in this ride. It speeds through the entire layout. Like you said, it's 6,500 feet of track, and it just goes. It really does. And you can really feel that speed definitely in what we were calling those speed turns. They're these really low to the ground turns that just, you can really feel how fast you're going through these things. Especially being close to the ground, I feel like having that ground just right next to you and racing by it so fast just cements the amount of speed that you have when you're going through this ride.
Yeah, layout wise, this is one of my favorite layouts of all time. Just because, you start out with that lift hill, and you get a great view of Lake Erie and the rest of Cedar Point. It's right on the edge of the island, so you get a good view of both. But then it really, as you go through the layout, you get to see a lot of Cedar Point, and you get to see some of the areas that you can't necessarily see from a walking path. And it's just a gorgeous, beautiful, picturesque layout. And then this coaster, I don't care what anybody says, but it's the most picture perfect coaster out there. Between the lift hill and those 2 or 3 outer banks that you can see really well, and then if you take it from the Lake Erie side, you get a really good picture of the roller coaster. If you take it from the island side, you get the water in the background. I think that's an underrated thing about this ride. It's very well, what would you say? What's the word?
So what I actually have this in here. What we didn't talk about, what I felt like we didn't talk about last night, is how pretty this ride is. That's what I like to call it, and it's exactly it's very picturesque. If you Google any pictures of just Cedar Point in general, half of those pictures is gonna have just like the Millennium Force lift hill in it. It's a beautiful color. It's in a really awesome spot on the edge of the peninsula. And I just remember when we went to go to this park for the very first time, we did it as a family trip. And so we did it over a few days. And the first day that we got there kind of in the evening, and we decided to go check out the park before we were going to actually go there. And so we got there like right as the sun was setting over Lake Erie, and it was the most like cinematic thing you've ever seen. It was like a sunset, bright orange over the water, and then just all of the coasters as a shadow And it was gorgeous. It was something that you would see out of a movie or like a photograph or something. It was absolutely beautiful.
Oh, for sure. I just think that's something that's cool about this ride. But the other thing that we really didn't talk about last episode was that first drop. Now, I'm the type of roller coaster person. Number one, I hate twisted first drops. I hate turns in the first drop. I'm a very purist when it comes to my first drops. And I also tell people, a first drop can make or break a coaster. This is one of the first drops that makes it. Like, it is. I didn't realize it was 80 degrees, which is steeper than I thought it was. But it's just a drop that never ends. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. You're still looking towards the ground, like, is it ever gonna come?
Oh yeah.
So, definitely one of the better first drops on a roller coaster out there, I think.
A lot of the times with a drop, it's like you said, you go down it and you get an awesome first drop. But with this one, just with the sheer length of it, it's like you're going and you're ready for that pull out. You have that normal instinct on where a roller coaster pull out should be, and then it's just not there. And you're still free falling down this drop.
Yeah, it's definitely a really, really good first drop. The other thing that we mentioned a lot in our last episode is that this roller coaster doesn't necessarily feature a ton of airtime, but it does have some G forces. It does throw you around a little bit with some of the transitions. And that first pullout after the first drop actually can cause people to gray out. It makes me gray out when the roller coaster is running really well. But yeah, this coaster does feature some really good G forces on it, and then, like I said, it's all about speed. That's what this roller coaster really showcases.
Oh yeah, that first pullout makes me gray out every single time. And I made the joke in the last episode that so many other coasters claim these crazy forces and it'll be an insane ride, but this is the only roller coaster out there that's made it so that I couldn't see, that I've ridden so far at least. So, and a lot, what we were also talking about in the previous episode is the history that's behind this ride. So being at Cedar Point is known as the roller coaster capital of the world, so it's at a premier park. And then on top of that, it was the first Giga to be built. It was the first coaster to break 300 feet. And that in and of itself is a crazy milestone.
First full circuit roller coaster to break 300 feet.
Full circuit.
You gotta put that little asterisk in there, otherwise, Six Flags Magic Mountain fans will come after you. You gotta
full circuit to go 300 feet, which is an achievement to be said. And, it's a 20-year-old ride. It was released in 2000, hence the name Millenium Force. And it's still there. It's still standing. It's still operating. It's still a park favorite. It's still a guest favorite. And a must-ride by roller coaster enthusiasts also. So it's really a coaster that has stood the test of time.
Yeah, I'd call this roller coaster a must-ride just because of the historical aspect and being at Cedar Point. I think probably like 80% of the roller coasters at Cedar Point are must-ride roller coasters just because it's Cedar Point. But this one kind of puts itself apart a little bit because it was built during the peak of the coaster wars, where amusement parks were battling and trying to figure out who could build the biggest, who could break the most records. And Cedar Point was the best at breaking records. They have the first full circuit coaster over 200 feet, the first full circuit over 300, and the first full circuit over 400. That's an achievement in itself to have all three of those records. I think that's really impressive. But this roller coaster was at the forefront of the coaster wars, and it really started to push the envelope of what, engineers thought was possible in a roller coaster.
Oh, yeah. When was Gemini built? Sorry, totally random question.
Gemini?
Yeah, I'll explain in a second.
the 80s, I think.
Okay.
It's an aero coaster, so it's older. It's one of the older ones at Cedar Point. I know that.
Yeah.
That's a guess of saying the 80s.
Where I'm going with this is in my research. So obviously talking about Millennium Force, we have to mention Coaster Wars. So I was looking into the actual history of like coasters in general, and I did not realize how quote unquote relatively new of an invention steel coasters were. So the first steel coaster was built in 1959, which of course is still a while ago, but that's still basically the 60s. But the first upside down coaster wasn't built until 1975. And then with Gabe's estimate of Gemini being built in the 80s, that was the first coaster to breach 100 feet. So like roller coaster innovation is this relatively new thing, and I didn't really understand that. And I'm like, they're basic at 20 years doesn't seem like that much, but like it really is in the roller coaster world because there's such a new thing right now. So
Yeah, well, the thing you have to realize is that the coaster that started the coaster wars, that started pitting amusement parks against each other, was Magnum XL. So, and that's another aero coaster, and that was the late 80s. So, like, I think at 86 or 87, somewhere in there.
also, I want to point out real quick that there's another one at Cedar Point.
Yeah, another Cedar Point ride. But Magnum, before Magnum, amusement parks really only had one company or two companies to choose from, and that was either Arrow or Schwarzkopf when it came to roller coasters. You didn't have these big companies blowing up until really the 90s, and that's when B&M came in. Intamin really blew up in the 90s. Some of the other manufacturers came up in the 90s and 2000s. Well, even a roller coaster company like RMC, they didn't start building roller coasters until like 2011. So, or designing them, I should say. They helped construct other rides. But like, when you think about roller coasters, until the 90s hit, that's really where you didn't see a lot of evolution in roller coasters, which is why this roller coaster is so notable historically wise, because it was built in 2000.
Oh yeah, so to bring this all back to the Millennium Force, this really was a milestone in the innovation of roller coasters nowadays. And then even just it was a great milestone for Intamin itself because this was the debut of their cable lift system. It was their Giga model. And so this was also a great milestone for a company, for Intimate, and for their breakthrough into other roller coasters as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a really important roller coaster, and it's definitely a good one. I really love this ride. The ride experience from start to finish. The thing I like to say about Millennium Force, though, is it's very well balanced. So you have, a little bit of airtime, a little bit of G-forces, you have a little bit of speed as well. You have the turns and twists and stuff. It's a very well balanced roller coaster. It doesn't focus just on one element or one force. And I think that's a really cool thing about this ride.
Yeah, we, as I stated in the previous episode, this is really a ride experience that you can't really get anywhere else. Not anything remotely close to this, and you could try and compare it to other B&Ms or even other Intimates, and it really doesn't do the same thing. It's really its own unique ride experience, which just makes it, puts it on its own level, and I think what makes it still stand at the top of coasters nowadays, 20 years later.
Oh, for sure. It's definitely, I call it a bucket list ride. It's definitely a bucket list ride. And it's something that I really appreciate. With that, though, are you ready to transition to my roller coaster that I really want to talk about? So, can we do it?
Yes, this is perfectly switch gears, especially because I'm interested to hear what you think of this ride, because I haven't ridden it before, but I also really like this type of ride. So, by all means,
Yes. Yes, so Montu is located at Busch Gardens, Tampa. So it's in Tampa, Florida. This is the best invert ever. You can't change my mind on that. A lot of people will argue either Banshee or Raptor or maybe Alpine Geist at Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. But no, this is it for for this style of roller coaster. I believe it's the only B&M invert to make my top 15, so that should really tell you how much I love this roller coaster. But I definitely am interested to see what you have discovered about this roller coaster and your research, and what your opinion, or what you think your opinion would be of it.
Well, just like looking at the stats of this thing, it has 7 inversions, which is already complete insanity to me. I didn't do a whole lot of research on this, but my like milestone for comparing other B&M inverts is Batman, and that's because it's at my home park. It's the first B&M invert that I've ridden, and then because Batman was such a big ride, they put clones everywhere. So then that became the thing: as you go to another park and you'd ride the Batman clone, and you would inevitably discover that it's not as good as the original. So, but of course that's hard to do with original layouts, because of course original layouts aren't just clones of this other ride that I've ridden. So original layouts already intrigue me. And then the other part of this, because I'm the theming queen, is this one is Egyptian themed, which I really, really like. And they even brought the theming into like the tunnels on the ride and stuff. So this thing sounds really, really cool. And I am really mad that I have not ridden it yet.
Yeah, it's definitely a great roller coaster. So comparing it to Batman, I would put Batman, maybe at a 6.
Okay.
It's a good ride. It's fun. It's never the best ride at an amusement park, but it's one of the favorites at that park. Montu is a top tier 10. Like, this thing is it's in a completely different stratosphere than the original Batman clones are. And even comparing it to a ride that you have ridden, like in Dueling Dragons, this thing would knock it out of the park. Like, you wouldn't even consider this in the same ballpark as those rides. Do you remember riding Banshee at Kings Island?
Yes.
The newest invert?
Yeah.
Even that roller coaster I would not put in the same category as Montu. And the one advantage that roller coasters in Florida have is it is hot and humid in Florida. Which means roller coasters do run faster. I will put a little asterisk there. But this roller coaster, man, it just kicks butt. And if it wasn't for some of the better roller coasters that I have ridden, this could be like a top 5 roller coaster, and it honestly could. So it's really good. Should I dive right into the layout then?
Yes.
Okay, so this roller coaster goes out of the station, does a 180-degree turn, you go up to the lift hill, and you hit the first drop, which is a twisted first drop, which I'm not a huge fan of. But for some reason, this drop, when you get to the bottom and you hit that pullout, it feels like your feet are going to, like, break off your ankles and, like, go flying to the ground. Like, there's so much force in that first pullout. That's where you hit the first vertical loop. After the vertical loop, you pop up into the implement loop, which is probably the weakest inversion on the roller coaster. It's actually probably I call it a dull spot. It really loses its speed because it's such a big inversion. And then you have the 0G roll after that, which is one of my favorite inversions from B&M, is the 0G roll. Mm-hmm. They do it better than everyone else. I don't know why. But this one is really good. It's a really nice floater moment that you don't get a ton of on inverts. You don't get a lot of airtime on inverts. And on this one, the 0G roll actually gives you that dose of floater airtime. And it's really, really good in the front row. If you get a front row ride on this coaster, that floating even seems longer. It's the only element that is the best in the front row, unfortunately, though. After that, you have the Batwing. And the Batwing is another inversion that just feels like your freaking ankles are going to break off and your feet are going to go flying. It pulls some forces.
Yeah, okay, sorry. Pause for 1 second. You need to explain to me what this Batwing thing is, because I remember reading it, and I was like, what the hell is that? And I didn't get enough time to look up what it is.
So a Batwing inversion, it's specific to the to the man, I'm having a brain fart here.
B&M inverts?
It's specific to the inverts. So Batwing is just basically another version of a dive loop.
Okay.
However, the dive loop is a lot slower inversion, where Batwing is a lot quicker paced, fast, super quick transition inversion.
Okay.
And that's what this is. It's basically a dive loop, but it's on an invert, so the track is a little bit different. Okay. And then it's just the other thing too is it's a sharper curve at the top, so it really pulls some whip. And then when you get to the bottom, you're moving. Mm-hmm. So it's super fast paced. Okay. After the Batwing, you have, I believe it's a small quick helix, and you pop up into the block break. After that, you have another vertical loop, followed by a corkscrew and some turns and stuff. But the really cool thing about this ride is it's only 150 feet in the air. But what they did is they built trenches all over. So all of these inversions where they start are really low to the ground or even below grade. Dang. And what that does is it makes the pacing absolutely insane, because you don't really lose any speed, because you just, we're going to lose some speed, let's just dig a hole here. And then now we don't lose speed. So this roller coaster from start to finish is boom, 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 boom. Even with the block break section, it doesn't really hit that hard. It doesn't pull a lot of speed out of the roller coaster. And it is just a pacing monster. And then it's a G-force monster. This is another roller coaster that can cause some people to gray out. I did not, however, I have a higher tolerance for G-forces than maybe the average roller coaster rider. It's just, this is the best invert ever that I've ridden, at least. I think it's going to stay that way.
It sounds really interesting because you talk about pacing, and I rode, I believe it's called the Great Bear at Hershey Park, which is a B&M invert with an original layout. And that was my first thought when I rode that ride, is it was like, it had some good speed, it had some good moments, but I felt like there were a ton of just straight tracks where I was just sitting there doing nothing. And it sounds like this ride doesn't do that. It literally sends you into one element and then the next. You don't have a second to breathe. You don't have a second to think. It just whips you through this entire ride.
Yeah, it's a pacing monster, and there's not a straight piece of, other than the lift hill, like, you're either turning or going upside down or flipping over or rolling over, blah, 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 blah. It's just, like I said, it is just element after element after element. This is a roller coaster where you have to ride like 4 times to be able to comprehend the entire layout, because it's just so fast. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't have time, other than, like I said, the Immelman loop. You don't have time to breathe. You don't have time to think. You're just pounded with G-forces, pounded with inversions. And here's the thing. It's not even 4,000 feet of track, and they still managed to shove 7 inversions into this roller coaster, which is just a crazy feat. And I just love this roller coaster. It's another really personal favorite of mine. It is just, like, and we can talk about the theming a little bit too, because there is some Egyptian theming with the tunnels and the way their facade is decorated and stuff. It kind of looks like Egypt. But this roller coaster is all about the ride. And I love it from start to finish.
The theming really there in this case was more to just make it look pretty, instead of to being a really actual element of the ride itself. So I do appreciate any little theming that is there. And yes, the whole thing is that Montu is the god of war from Egypt, and he has a hawk head. And I actually really think that fits this ride, though. This is another ride where the name actually makes a lot of sense to me, because the god of war obviously is going to be super intense, but then that hawk's head, if you think about a hawk, they can fly really fast and really intensely. And so this is a ride where I think the name really fits what this ride actually does to you.
Oh, for sure. It's a top tier roller coaster, and it's not even the best one in that amusement park. There's another roller coaster there that we'll be talking about a little bit later. But this is the second best ride in the park, and it's not even close. It really isn't. And Busch Gardens, Tampa, has some really good roller coasters. Like, don't get me wrong, this is just the second best in the park, and like I said, it's not even close. But with that, we went over our time a little bit. That's all right. Would you like to go first and pick your winner here?
Yeah, this one, you were pretty right last week. Montu is going to be my pick. That thing just sounds. It has 7 freaking inversions. That just sounds crazy to me. I was doing my basic research, and of course, it's one of the first thing that pops up. I'm like, 7? How the hell do they have enough room to fit 7 inversions? So, and the way you talk about this ride has me pretty well convinced that this thing is awesome and I need to go ride it. And so, as much as we love Millenium Force, I think Montu is the winner here.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, Millennium Force is one number behind this roller coaster on my top 15. So it's hard for me to pick Millennium Force over this ride. And like I said, and here's the thing, I'm not a huge B&M invert fan, not like you are at least. Like I said, for the Batman clones and some of the other inverts that I've ridden, they're fun, they're intense, G-forces, but they're not my favorite. But this roller coaster truly is one of my favorites, and that's just a testament to how good this roller coaster really is for me to look past the invert part of it and still throw it in my top 10. So I'm taking Montu here. It's a really, really good roller coaster. Like I said, it's the best invert that I've ridden. And that list includes Raptor and Cedar Point, which is a really good one.
Yes.
That list includes Banshee at Kings Island, which is another really good invert. And that list also includes Alpine Geist, which is the sister invert at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. And I still think this roller coaster is in another class all on its own, even compared to those. I love Montu, and it's my pick here.
Yes, so... But to not sell Millennium Force short, it only was one, so it broke my top 10, and it was only one short of breaking your top 10. And then a lot of, so of course doing research and stuff, I listened to a lot of reviews and whatnot by other people. And what a lot of other people say is that it may not be the best coaster at Cedar Point, but a lot of the times it's their favorite. So me and Gabe have said this before.
Sure.
There is a difference between what might be the better coaster and what lives in your heart and is your favorite coaster. So
yeah, don't let us choosing Montu over Millennium Force sell Millennium Force short. It is still a really, really good roller coaster. It's won its last battle against Hades 360, and it's just a fun experience from start to finish as well. But this Montu is just... It's so creative. That's the thing with Montu, is it's so creative and such an individual layout that it is just so good. And I love that ride. So
oh yeah. Every
but
time
with that,
sorry.
Go ahead.
Every time we talk, like we're going to a park trip and we're doing an overview of all the rides and stuff, and Gabe says there's a B&M invert. The first thing that goes through my mind is it original layout or is it Batman clone? And every single time it's an original layout, I instantly get excited. So that, just even that fact is something that should excite you about this ride.
Oh, for sure. But with that, let's go ahead and wrap this episode up. So next week, we will be recording our number 9 roller coasters, and that is going to be ejector airtime versus floater airtime. Really, this is a battle of a massive coaster versus a very compact coaster.
Yeah. This is also going to feature another coaster, or type of coaster that we haven't talked about at all yet. And a relatively new design against a tried and true at every park kind of deal. So it's going to be interesting how they match up.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely 2 really good roller coasters in my book. However, your coaster did not make my top 15, so we'll see.
Mine didn't even make your list, and yours is much higher on my list, so we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see if your coaster can punch above its weight of class a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
But with that, I think we're good to wrap this episode up.
Absolutely. Come back next week, everybody, and join us for, I already forgot the name of the episode.
Ejector versus airtime, that will be, or ejector versus floater airtime, that will be next week.
Thank you.